all began when my friends and I decided to do something different for Halloween. We were looking for adventure, so we decided to explore a creepy old mansion that everyone in town said was haunted. The mansion was known as Hollywood House, and it had a scary reputation. So dressed in our Halloween costume, we took our flashlight and set out on the chilly October night. The mansion was on the edge of town and it looked really eerie. Broken windows, overgrown ivy, and a generous spooky vibe surrounded it. The house was said to be haunted, and there were all kind of ghost stories about it. As we entered the house, the creaking floorboards and the dark interior gave us chills. The place was dusty, and cobwebs hung from everywhere. We explored the room one by one, hoping to find something spooky. As we moved deeper into the house, strange things started to happen. Our Ouija board, a board game we used to talk to ghosts, started moving by itself, spelling out mysterious messages. We also heard whispers and felt cold spots, but we weren't sure if it was our imagination or something else. We didn't give up, and we followed the Ouija board's messages. It led us into the basement, which was even creepier. The basement was dark, damp, and filled with tunnels that seemed to go on forever. We heard strange sounds and distant laughter. The air got colder, and it felt like something was watching us. As we explored deeper into the tunnels, we found a room that was the source of strange sounds. The room was filled with a mask of all kinds hanging on the wall. Some were old and some were modern. In the middle of a room, a masked figure stood in front of the mirror. The figure was dressed in an elaborate costume, and they were just staring at their own reflection. The figure didn't speak, but their eyes showed a deep sadness. It was really weird. Suddenly, the figure turned to look at my friend Mike, and the mask was an exact copy of Mike's face. We were all shocked and scared. The figure didn't talk, but it gestured toward the mirror. When we looked at the mirror, we saw our own reflections, and we were all wearing different masks. It was surreal, and it felt like the masks were showing our true selves hidden behind our costumes. Then the figure in Mike's mask began to cry, and it was a sad, heartbreaking cry. We didn't know what to do, but it was clear that something strange and scary was happening. We left the room and tried to find a way back. But as we walked through the tunnels, we realized something was wrong. The tunnel seemed to twist and turn, and we couldn't find a way out. We heard strange whispers and laughter, and it felt like something was playing tricks on us. We had to follow the Ouija board, hoping it would lead us to something out of the maze. The tunnel seemed endless, and we were getting scared. It was like we were in a nightmare, and we didn't know how we escaped. Finally, after a long time, we found a door that led us to a small room with a mirror. It felt like deja vu. In the mirror, we saw our own reflection, but something was strange. The masks from before were now a part of our faces, like they had become one of us. It was really scary, and we couldn't look away from the mirror. The mask showed our true selves, our deepest fear and desires. It was like the mirror had a mysterious power, one that could reveal our secrets. We tried to run away from the mirror, but we couldn't. The mask continued to change our faces, making us look like our true self. It was really weird and creepy. We couldn't leave the room, and it felt like the mirror was talking our secrets from us. We were trapped, and we didn't know what would happen next. The Halloween adventure we had hoped for had turned into a strange and eerie experience we couldn't escape from. It was a Halloween night we would never forget. It was a chilly Halloween night, and I just had moved into a new neighborhood. My small, cozy house sat between the welcoming glow of porch light and the distant laughter of kids in costumes. I was excited about my first Halloween in this place, but I had no idea what was in store. I wasn't a Halloween enthusiast, so I hadn't bothered with decoration or even a costume. My plan was simple: hand out candy to the little ghosts and goblins who'd come knocking. I set up a bowl of candy by the door and watched as the first few trick-or-treaters approached. The usual suspects came by, kids in colorful costumes with parents keeping watch from the sidewalk. It was all very ordinary and a bit heartwarming. But then around 12 midnight, things took a strange turn. A knock on the door startled me. Who could be trick-or-treating at this hour? I opened the door to find a child standing there, a child like no other trick-or-treater I'd ever seen. The kid, who couldn't even be more than 10 years old, was dressed in a costume that seemed out of place. It was a weird mix of Victorian Gothic, completely with a powdered wig and a porcelain mask. I had to do a double take, thinking it was just an elaborate costume. I greeted the child. "Aren't you a little young to be out at this hour?" The kid didn't respond, just held out a tattered black pillowcase, the kind kids used to collect candy in years ago. I reached for the candy bowl, expecting a small smile or a thank you, but the child remained unnervingly still, the masked face betraying no emotion. It was like something out of a horror movie. I dropped a couple of chocolates into the bag and wished the child a happy Halloween, expecting them to move along with other kids. But they just stood there, the masked, expressionless eyes locked onto mine. The silence hung in the air and it was unnerving. I tried to lighten the mood. "You've got a great costume. Really spooky. Are you out with your parents?" Still no response. The kid remained motionless, not a single word or nod. I was growing increasingly uncomfortable. I glanced down the dimly lit street, wondering if a parent might be lurking into the shadow, but I saw no one. I decided to leave it at that, figuring that this was just an unusually dedicated trick-or-treater. I closed the door and shook off the eerie feeling that had settled over me. But then things got even stranger. I peered out of the window and I saw the kids still standing on a porch. It had been a few minutes and they hadn't moved an inch. I couldn't understand it. Was this some kind of Halloween prank? Was I being watched? I decided to ignore it and go about my evening. But that feeling of being watched didn't go away. I checked the clock on the wall and it was well past midnight. I began to think that I'd imagined the whole thing and the child was long gone. But just as I was about to head to bed, it was again another knock on the door. It was that child, still wearing that unsettling costume, still holding out the tattered pillowcase. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. This wasn't normal. I gave them a handful of candy, hoping they'd finally leave, but the child just stood there, the silent presence growing increasingly unsettling. I tried asking them questions, but they didn't answer. I wondered if they were lost or needed help, but they didn't just react to anything I said. I began to feel a sense of dread creeping in. I had no idea who this child was, and their unwavering silence was making me uneasy. I glanced at my phone, thinking I should call police or ask a neighbor for help, but something held me back. It was then the child's gloved hand reached out, pointing a cylinder finger down the street. My gaze followed the gesture, and in the distance I saw a faint light. It was an old house, barely visible in the darkness. It looked like something out of a horror movie. The child's silence, urging me, made my skin crawl, but I couldn't resist the sense of curiosity that overcame me. I decided to follow the pointed finger and venture towards the eerie house. As I got closer, the house seemed to grow even more ominous. It was as if the very structure exuded an aura of darkness and foreboding. The wind whispered through the tree and the leaves rustled with a ghostly voice. I reached the front door and hesitated for a moment. The child had disappeared, leaving me alone to face this foreboding place. The door creaked open with a slow, deliberate sound like an invitation to the unknown. Inside, the air was damp and musty, and the weak moonlight filtered through the cracked windows. It was an old house filled with cobwebs and long forgotten memories. The silence was suffocating. As I explored the house, my footsteps echoed through empty hallways. The rooms were filled with broken furniture and tattered drapes. There was a strange sensation that I wasn't alone, that something unseen watched my every move. I finally entered a room that sent chills down my spine. It was a child's room with faded wallpaper and a single ancient rocking chair. The bed was unmade, as if someone had left in a hurry. The room held a profound sense of sadness, and I couldn't help but feel that something terrible had happened here. The silence was suddenly broken by a faint, distant sound. It was the sound of a music box playing a haunting melody that seemed to come from nowhere. My heart raced as I followed the sound, my footsteps echoing the eerie silence of the house. I found myself in a room at the end of the hallway. The music box sat on a dusty shelf, playing by itself with no one around. The music filled the room, and a sense of melancholy washed over me. It was as if the house itself was trying to convey a message, a story from the past that had been lost to time. I couldn't explain it, but I felt a connection to that music box, as if it held the key to unlocking the mysteries of this house. I reached out to stop the music, and as if my hand touched the music box, everything around me seemed to shift. The room transformed, and I found myself in a different place, a different time. It was a Halloween night, just like one I started from, but it was many years in the past. The room was now filled with children in old-fashioned costume, laughing and playing games. I watched in awe as the scene unfolded before me, like a window into the past. It was as if I had been transported to a long gone and I was witnessing a Halloween celebration from another era. I tried to interact with the children, but it was as if I was a ghost from the future, invisible to them. I could only watch and wonder at the innocence of joy of the long ago Halloween night. As the night went on, I noticed the child in the unsettling costume, the same one who had come to my door. They stood apart from the others, watching the other festivities with a solemn expression. I approached the child, wanting to understand who they were and why they had brought me here. But just as I got closer, the child turned to me and extended their hand as if it was inviting me to dance. I hesitated, unsure of what to do, but something in their eyes drew me in. I took their hand, and as we began to dance, moving to the haunting melody of the music box, as we danced, I felt a connection with the child, as if we shared a bond that transcended time. It was a surreal and a beautiful moment, a glimpse into a Halloween celebration that had been lost to the ages. But then, as the music reached its ending, everything changed. The child's expression shifted from solemnity to fear, and they looked past me, their eyes filled with terror. I turned to see what had frightened them, and that's when I saw it. A dark, shadowy figure looming in the doorway. It was a presence that executed malevolence, and I couldn't feel its evil intent. The child screamed, and the joy of the Halloween celebration turned into a chaos and fear. I wanted to protect the child I was dancing with, but I was powerless and a mere observer in the strange and haunting moment from the past. The shadowy figure advanced, its dark form enveloping the room. It reached out with long skeletal fingers, and with a swift, chilling motion, it touched the child I had been dancing with. The child let out a heart-wrenching scream, and they then vanished, as if nothing had ever existed. The room fell into darkness, and I was left alone in the silence, with only the echoes of the child's scream lingering in the air. I was back in the present, standing in the room with music box. The room had transformed back to its eerie, empty state, and the music had stopped. I was filled with profound sense of loss and sorrow from the child I had danced with. I couldn't explain what had just happened, but I knew that I had witnessed a tragedy from the past, a Halloween night that had ended in darkness and despair. The connection I had felt with the child was real, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had played a part in something that had gone terribly wrong. As I left the old house and returned to my own home, I couldn't help but wonder about the child in the unsettling costume and the shadowy figure that had taken them away. I couldn't forget the haunting melody of the music box and a sense of being a witness to a long-forgetting Halloween tragedy. To this day, I don't know if I truly experienced a journey through time or if it was a vivid dream. But one thing is certain, the mysteries of this Halloween night have stayed with me, and I can't help but wonder if the past still haunts the present, and if there are secrets hidden in the shadows that are best left undisturbed.